Hello, this is a tech update. I'm going to be talking about a gimbal which I use for stabilizing the videos I take of in-action games and battle reports of our miniature hobby, and just talk about why I picked it and some of the technical details about it, along with the camera I use on there as well, which is a Sony ZV-1. So zooming down, here's the product, which I bought myself, so this isn't a paid for promotion or anything. I bought this on Amazon. I bought it with a discount as well because this was a refurbished one. Hence the box is a little bit busted up because I think it's been shipped to someone else. They didn't like it and sent it back. Yeah, worth looking at if you're looking at any tech recently on Amazon. Have a look in their used section because I've done that a couple of times and got 40 to 60 pounds off a product that's listed as used but in the Amazon warehouse. So that's the first point. It's worth having a look for cheap versions of this if you can see it. So the gimbal, and what does it do? Well, basically the gimbal allows you to stabilize your camera, and in this case it's these small mirrorless style cameras, and I use the Sony ZV-1, which I think that's kind of slightly representative of on there. You mount it onto the gimbal device, and then little motors in the sections here mean that it stabilizes it as you hold it, and you don't get any judder. And so that's why I got it, because I was doing videos of battle reports of games and zooming in close, and then I was finding I was jumping about and juddering quite a lot. And cameras and phones these days have image stabilization in them, but this is like a whole nother level of keeping things stable and really smooth. So I will show you a demo of that zooming in shortly using a camera on there once I've showed you the kit. Now, as a product, you can actually add it comes with an adapter actually to do your iPhone or any other kind of phone that you happen to use. It also has the sort of GoPro adapter or the standard camera. So I'm using it for a standard camera on there, and I'll be able to show you the results of that. And that's just another sort of view of how you can sort of twist it around. But yes, pop that away and then I'll get it out so you can have a look. So here it is. It's a Xiaomi Crane M2, and while it's powered off, I mean, it just sort of twists around and can be a bit clumsy in your hands. But it's worth mentioning straight away, this bit on the front here, which is by a separate branded company called Small Rig. This is a frame that Small Rig do that you can put your camera into, and I'm using that here as a way of kind of doing a quick release of my camera in and out of here. And I'm not going to go into the detail, but as a product, it has a method that you need to go through for balancing your camera, depending on the weight of the lens out the front and the body of the camera. So when you first get this, you have to do that balancing act. And the reason for it is because you don't want the little motors in these areas here fighting against the weight and balance of the camera. So if you put the camera on there and it leans forward in its natural balanced position while you're holding the device upright, it means the small motors that are in here fight that little bit harder to bring the thing level. So ideally you want it almost floating, balancing on its own, so that when the motors work, they're just providing that smoothing of the movement in the device itself. So yeah, and you do that. I'm not going to show it because this isn't a video about the balancing. You can find thousands of people have balanced these on YouTube and show you that. But essentially you have to sort of untighten things, move things backwards and forwards, move these brackets backwards and forwards. They're quite easy to do by loosening these different tightening areas. Once you've done that, you've got things balanced and you're ready to go. So I've already done that. It also has on the bottom a handy mount. So once you've got it down on a table, you can hold it there stably as well. And you can see at the moment this isn't quite balanced, because until I get my camera in there, when I completed the balancing, the weight isn't being dispersed correctly between all the different brackets in there. So when it is, I'll be able to sort of hand hold it and move it around. Now, the reason I went for this Small Rig frame that fits around my camera, if I move it down, you can see the Small Rig a bit clearer there. The reason I did that is because I often, when I'm doing these films and videos and when I'm free from my desk area, which I'm on at the moment, I will want to connect things like mics, have access to different areas on the camera to pull things in and out, batteries and SD cards. And by having it in this small rig setup, it makes that a little bit easier. And in fact, this small rig frame for the Sony ZV-1 has a nice cutout at the bottom for easy removal of batteries and things. So it just makes life a lot easier to have it in there and makes the camera a little bit heavier. So the other thing just worth mentioning is there is a weight limit on this. Once you hit that weight limit, your camera is going to flop all over the place because it's going to be too much for the small motors in there to cope with. So in regard to fitting the Sony in there, here it is, the Sony ZV-1. It's a kind of a small compact camera. It's known for vlogging, so it's sort of ideal to put up and hold. People often have a small tripod handle on the bottom of it because it's sort of ideal for zooming on faces and small things. But it does have a product mode as well, and that's what I'm using on this Sony, a product mode which allows you to zoom into small miniatures, which I'll show you in a minute. So just in terms of fitting it in there, remembering of course that I'm using here the small rig frame on top of the Crane M2 Gimble, I simply have to tighten it up with this connector here. Now, because of the sort of nature of the Sony being a kind of, well, what's the best word, handy cam or small vlogging, lightweight, mirrorless camera, it doesn't have any easy places to sort of put a bracket like this on. So that's why, as you can see, the only way to sort of tighten this is to tighten it around the frame of where the lens comes out. But this doesn't have interchangeable lenses. It just has one lens in there, and that means it's just quite an easy place to connect to. You're never going to be removing this part from the Sony body there. So it's on, which means I haven't actually turned on this gimbal yet. But you can see I've got a relatively good balance there. I mean, that's nowhere in focus there. Maybe I can get that into focus a little bit better. Not that way, I won't. So, manual focusing done. But you can see now on the gimbal, it's not balancing totally straight in the middle. And that's because I haven't turned it on and the lens hasn't poked out. Yes, so as soon as I've moved out that lens, it's balanced a bit better, and that's obviously a tip when you're doing balancing on here. You want to do it before, whilst the lens is sticking out, because with everything in the position that it would be when you're using the camera. Other things worth mentioning on here, I found again with the Sony ZV-1, the small connector on the side here, which is the mic connector, is covered up if I don't have the small rig frame fitted as well. So having that small rig frame on there has just allowed this to poke out of the top so that I can get this Rode Wireless Go microphone in there. So just to sort of jump out again and talk about that kit that I use, there are up to 2 of these Wireless Go's can sync up with one of these base units that's connected to the top of the camera there, and all it's doing is receiving the audio and then using this cable to put the audio down into the camera's audio input. Now the camera itself has a mic on top here, which you can see, but it's not as good as these. And also, because we're doing miniature gaming with these, I often have someone on the other side of the table talking about a rule or some details, and they're maybe up to 5-6 foot away from me. So if they've got a remote mic on like this, it works perfectly. It sort of records their audio stream as well as my local audio stream where I am with the camera. So yeah, that's why I do the Rode on the top. But again, like everything else, you need that on there when you're balancing the gimbal so that everything's in order for the balancing and the setup. So if I turn it on now, and it's probably going to flip all over the place, I'll try and get this back to the main on position and turn it on. There's sort of one switch up on the side to turn the unit on. And you can see now its kind of little motors kick in and it puts it into its forward-facing orientation. And there's several modes on here. And if I pick the beast up, you can see even though I'm moving it, it's maintaining that view forward. And any kind of movement that I'm doing here, it slowly kind of catches up with my movement, which means you get a much more smooth result on the picture. And yeah, because this is in the lower cost bracket of gimbals, it's not quite the sort of monster smoothness that you'd get with one that's built for an SLR type digital camera with bigger lenses sticking out the front of them. You know, they obviously have to have bigger, smoother little motors in here, and this one's your lower end because it can move around the smaller gear, and depending on how you move it around you get a different set of transitions. And I quite like this in particular. The way I'm moving right down here backwards and forwards allows me to zoom in on miniatures on the tabletop. So if I bring it back up to the sort of standard tripod mount straight up position, there is a trick you can do where you can press the trigger at the front 3 times, and that will put it into a kind of a selfie mode. So if you were sort of holding this out, it would then flip it round on you, almost like flipping a camera. You press that button and it gives you the front camera on the on most of your mobile phones these days. But then if 3 clicks again on this trigger, it's back off. So if I just show you where that trigger is on the front there, it's quite handy to use that. The other thing you can do is with the Sony ZV-1, if I move it back up, there's a few controls to change the kind of modes on there. And you can also, it's now gone into access lock, it's got a bit cross with me holding on to it, but you can also get the record button to work with these Sonys and most of the cameras you've got on there, and your phones as well. If you had a phone mounted on here, you hit that record button and it will start recording on the phone wirelessly. So there's no extra cables needed between the gimbal. So there's one point in terms of this piece of kit, this Crane M2, which I think is worth mentioning if you are thinking of investing. And because it's, again, a slightly lower end device, there's not much clearance. I mean, I was lucky to get the clearance for the Rode mic there, which is kind of slightly sitting proud out of the back of the camera. But there's not much clearance on the base plate down here as well. This base plate is quite far back, and that's the necessity of how it's balancing. I don't have much weight on here because the camera is quite light, so the sort of base plate comes with its own extra weight in it. So that base plate down here is the one that comes with the Crane, and I just had a few issues when I've pulled it back. It touches, not that time, but there we go. It kind of bumps in to the bottom of that plate, and that just irritated me somewhat. It is at a funny angle. It's not likely you're going to be doing that, because if you are coming back at that angle and it's striking there, you are at kind of the extreme use case for the device. My typical way of working is that I'll shrink together the tripod at the back there, pull together the tripod, and then let the thing sort of roam freely around, holding onto that tripod and zooming in to whatever I happen to be wanting to get near with 2 hands on there. You can, of course, also control it from here, and you can see there's a little joystick on the back. If I move this sideways, get that in the frame. Yeah, that joystick is allowing me to sort of move up and down. So there's several different modes you can use, and this point of view mode on here now keeps the camera facing the same way the whole time. So that's kind of goes against what I want to do, because if I've got a miniature model, if I put one out down there and I want to zoom down to it, that works great by putting the camera down into this downwards position. But most of the time when I'm filming a game, I want, if I can get back to the right mode, I want this mode where it comes up to a sort of straight position when you're holding it up for filming around the tabletop, but then as you get down to the tabletop, it's keeping the camera pointing forward the whole time. That then it allows me to sort of reach over the table and zoom into a miniature as well, so you can then zoom in, see the miniature in action, or a dice roll, or whatever else it happens to be that you're doing. So yeah, it's the footage is nice and smooth. I don't have a problem with that. It's not sort of super pro grade. So in terms of timings, it's about 2.5 hours to sort of charge on a USB cable. USB-C cable connector goes in the side here to charge it up. And then in terms of usage, I think I've had about 2.5 hours out of it. Not permanently used, but kind of on and off in the garage when I'm filming something and moving it around. It's staying quite strong and giving me that sort of 2 hours of usage, really. So yeah, I think I'll show you some footage of it now. So I'll zoom in to actually recording on here so you can see me zooming into some stuff. So I'll flip down to this. Obviously I'm going to be recording that to the card inside here. But as I said again, great time saver if you've got something like this small rig. It's going to get cross now with me spinning it around in my hand. Turn it off. So as I said, it's a great time saver if you've got something like this small rig cage that you can put around. And they do these small rigs for all your kind of smaller mirrorless cameras like this. They do a variety of different models. If you do a search, I usually find them on Amazon. And it just means I can just loosen this here and pop it out and then get to everything like batteries and SD cards underneath with no trouble at all. Yeah, so there it is. I'll now show you some footage. I'm now doing what I should have done earlier, which I'm actually standing now. And it just makes me a little bit more stable with the gimbal in my hand when I've got two hands on it and I am standing up cleanly and not sat buckled over in a chair trying to make it happen. But it's still, you know, you still have to take care that you're not shaking things around. So yeah, I had something else to show which I can put out into action to sort of show zooming over something, maybe a bit of a pan. I've got this Viking ship here. Move some of these things out of the way, bit of a mess here. So yeah, so let's get down to deck level to see the model is in there, and then pull out a bit. As with all sort of miniature photography or filming, it's a challenge in terms of, do you want depth of field so that you can see things at a range, or do you want the detail when you get into a miniature? Why would you want to see, you know, why would you want to see everything else at the same time? So there is a balance to be had there. So yeah, there's a balance to be had in terms of miniature filming generally, that, you know, do you want everything blurred in the background, or do you want a kind of wider depth of field to get everything in at once? I've been finding with this camera that, you know, this kind of distance from the tabletop where you're showing an overall piece of action going on, you're fine. But as you get in a little bit closer, you need to really focus on one model, which is nice as well in terms of that close-up shot of having something in zoom with a nice blurry background. So there we go. I wanted to keep this one as a video relatively short and just give you a general overview of this tech by ZV-1, the M2 Crane. Let's have a look over here as well and just see the zoom in, and all my messy cables at the back there. So yeah, you could do some clever zooming in as well if you wanted to do that sort of interesting panning in and moving around a battlefield. Yeah, but it's been a good combination for me. The Sony ZV-1 on here, the mini rig, the small rig cage, and the M2 itself. Yeah, these are 15mm sci-fi miniatures which I use in my Grunts game. Yeah, and I store them in these Beasley storage trays. A mix of miniatures here from Brigade models, and these are the Federal Stats Europa, the FSE from Ground Zero Games, and some Ground Zero Games weapon mount type things over there as well. So I hope you've enjoyed the short overview, and what I'm going to be doing soon is some more videos of minis in the garage and actual live battle reports and games, and you'll be able to see the gear in action, because hopefully I'll be able to take some slightly smoother footage of things happening, which will make for good video content on YouTube. So thanks for listening in.